The purpose of this presentation is to review how to do your evaluation paper in a way that will get you the most points possible. This document is in Blackboard, so feel free to use it as we go over it or take notes as we go over it. In the beginning, it tells you what the page guides are. This is for 12-point font double space. If you alter from 12-point font double space, then there would be fewer pages. Excuse me. The title page does not count in these pages. For your references and attachments, there are no page limits. I am concerned with the total pages and not the number in each section. These are guides. I want you to use them just so you're clear on what my ideas are for your paper. Note that if you have under the minimum, I just want you to make sure that your work is thorough, accurate, and succinct. If you have more than the maximum, I will stop reading at the maximum page number. If you have 26 pages in your document, that's 25 of them are your document and one is a title page. Just keep that in mind. This presentation is based on doing 2 separate health fairs, one at a middle school and one at the university. You have 2 options in how you present your paper. You will either discuss each health fair in its entirety, or you will discuss each section in its entirety, discussing both health fairs within it. You need to think about it and choose the one that is best for you. If you are going to separate the middle school and the university, your paper will be set up like this. You will have an introduction to your paper. You will then do an evaluation overview, which we'll discuss in the scoring rubric. You then will discuss the middle school in its entirety, Towson University in its entirety, and then have a summary to your paper. If you would like to discuss them by topic and not school, then your paper will be set up like this: an introduction to your paper, an evaluation overview, which we will review in the scoring rubric, data collection for each event, analysis of data for each event, recommendations and conclusions for each event. Then at the end, you will summarize your paper. Either way, you're going to have 3 documents that you submit, possibly 4. Document 1 is your paper with a title page as required by APA. This has a page limit. Document 2 are the attachments related to evaluation. In Blackboard, it tells you which items have to be attached as an attachment. You have to make sure that you do that correctly. You will lose points if you don't. There are also documents that have been identified to put in a share drive. They need to be there because if I need to look up information, I'm going to go to the share drive. If they are saved correctly, I'll be able to find them. If you do not save them correctly and I cannot find them quickly, I will not have them to use. This next item is optional. It depends on how you're doing your paper. If your entire group work together, then your Excel sheets will be in the share drive because all of you will have the same data. If you divide it into groups, then you will either put your Excel sheets in Blackboard, but what I recommend is if you broke your group into smaller sections, that your Excel documents are actually in your paper. If you include your Excel documents, you will have 4 attachments. The 4th one is your reference sheet. If you don't have Excel documents, then your 3rd document will be your reference sheet. The reason I'm making a big deal out of this is some of you are not following directions and you are submitting 8 or 9 documents. I do not want to open 8 or 9 documents. I want to open 3 or 4. If you have 8 or 9 attachments, I'm only opening 3 or 4. So let's look at the scoring rubric. The first item is 2 points simply for having an introduction to your paper, that your paper has a body that follows that introduction and a summary to your paper. Please do not say, I will now discuss, or this paper will. I have given you several examples on prior papers on how to introduce your paper and summarize your paper without making those statements. At this level of college, those statements are not appropriate. The next section is worth 6 points. Each section is worth 3, it tells you here. So the first part, the evaluation overview, is to describe the purpose of evaluation in general using correct terminology. So I would expect you to use evaluation terminology explaining the purpose of evaluation. There's material on this in Blackboard and in your e-textbook. Then I want you to explain the purpose of our evaluation and what we evaluated using correct terminology. If you are unclear what you should be discussing, note the page limit. The page limit is 1 to 2 pages. The purpose of evaluation will probably be a paragraph, which is a half a page, usually. And then the purpose of our evaluation and what we evaluated will be a half to a page and a half. That means you need to limit your discussion. If this part of your paper is 4 pages long or 5 pages long, it probably means it is too long. Next, we have data collection. You have to thoroughly, accurately describe the way that we collected data for the evaluation process. You are not writing about how we collected data throughout the semester. You've already discussed some of that. This paper is only about the evaluation data. So you're going to explain the way we collected data. Almost everything you've written so far is just basic reporting of facts. At this point in the paper, you're going to start to analyze the data. If you have been coming to the optional meetings during our class time, I have tried to help you set up ways to analyze the data. This is the largest part of your paper. It has the most number of points, and I'm looking for you to be able to critically think about what your data mean. You are reporting on trends. You are not reporting on individual data, and this is what that means. I do not want to hear you say, the chi-square for question 1 for this class is 0.92, and that means, and question 2 for this class, the chi-square is this, and that's what this means. I don't want to hear that. I can read your chart. I can see what the chi-squares are, and I know what they mean. For your analysis, you have to tell me what the trends are and discuss whether or not your group was successful based on the data. So the question will be, was your middle school health fair a success? Yes or no? And then you need to use the data to explain that. Then you need to talk about, make sure you do that for the middle school and the university. Sometimes people use charts to show the data. The one chart that I've been working with you on for the color coding of the chi-square for middle school, that chart is very helpful in showing trends. There's also charts that you could put in there for Towson. Feel free to make your charts appendices. If your charts are appendices, make sure you say, see Appendix A or see Appendix B, so I know that there's a visual to help explain what you're saying. Then you have to talk about what made you successful. So were you successful, and then what made you successful? And if not, why not? So this whole section is 5 to 13 pages, but this one page right here will be 4 to 10 pages. All of this is 4 to 10. Everything right here is 4 to 10 pages. Then you have this little section that is a critique of how we collected the data. And that means you're going to critique the way the data were collected at the middle school and critique the way the data were collected at Towson, but you're only talking about the data for the evaluation portion. Lastly, we have recommendations and conclusions, and that is based on everything you have written to this point. What would be some recommendations that you would make for the future? And what are some overall conclusions that you can make from the data? I am looking for deep understanding. So if you were to say something like, I believe that in the future the data should be collected on a computer and not on paper, that really is not a deep understanding. However, if you were to say, in the future I recommend that the collection of the data at Towson University changes to be, and you explain something in depth with a reason why you would change it, that shows deeper understanding. The conclusions from the data are going to be things that are overall statements based on all of the data that you have. Each group has different data. The data mean different things for different groups. So each group section in this area, just like most of this paper, could be very different from other groups. Finally, you have sufficient in-text citations. You should have at least one, because when you're talking about the purpose of evaluation, you need to cite something. And then for spelling and grammar, if you have up to 5 errors, you get 6 points, and then you lose a point for each error over 5. APA, no errors, equals 4, and then you lose points beyond that. Do you have sufficient APA references? Do you have the N-check attachment, which is below the scoring rubric? Do you have your peer and self-evaluation forms filled out and attached? That's one of the attachments. And do you correctly and appropriately have all the data sheets that are supposed to be there? So just putting in all these attachments, 3/6 is worth 10 points. That's 16% of this grade just by submitting all the attachments that are required. So you can see just by following directions, you could easily get 30% of the points on this paper. So here's an attachment that you need to include in this paper. You're going to copy and paste this form into an attachment. What's important is that you are scoring or grading the class of Health 430. You're not scoring me, you're not scoring you, you're not scoring your group. You are scoring the class. And the reason you're doing this is we're supposed to cover all 7 standards for health education in Health 430. You're going to answer how well do you think each standard was covered in this class. Comments are required. This chart can be an 11-point font because it was developed that way. Margins are not 1 inch, and that's okay. All you have to do is copy and paste this chart into your attachments. You're going to give the course a grade of A to F and explain why. If you give it an A, explain why. If you give it a C, explain why. If you give it an F, explain why. This information that you provide me, I then use to alter and revise the course based on your feedback. So this is very critical in making sure that in your eyes we're addressing everything we're supposed to address. The other item that you include in this paper are your peer and self-evaluations. We will go over those in class, but you need to make sure you follow directions. One of the key elements is you put those in this paper. You also put them in a separate document place in Blackboard. If you have questions, please review them and ask them in class. I want to remind you that texting me is reserved for emergencies and not every single question you have about an assignment. Hopefully this helps you do well on your paper. Feel free to listen to it again. if you have questions or you need to review what goes in your paper. Thank you and good luck writing your assignment.